You ready to tell the people what we're going to do today? Good morning. It is 2 days till Christmas, 3 days till Christmas, right? Yes, my hair is in curlers still. You know, it just didn't happen last night. And this close to the holidays, curlers. It's just how it's gonna be. I did finish my Christmas dress for Christmas dinners. However, I do have several more casual events to attend this year, and I would love to be on theme, but also a little bit, not the most overdressed. So I was wandering down the aisles of my local neighborhood thrift store. Yes, Bear, aren't they pretty? And I came across these vintagey Christmas tablecloths. There's this green one with the holly, and then there's this one with this like poinsettia print. There. So I love the scalloped hem on the bottom of this one, but I don't know if you can see it is a little bit more faded. This one has been used and washed. I don't think there's any like table stains on it, like coffee stains or anything, which if you are sewing something with a tablecloth, be wary that that can happen, so just be careful to avoid those sections. And then there's a lot more of the green one, which would make for a better skirt and bodice situation, but I am still leaning towards this red one. So I don't really have a plan for this. Foresight, who is she? Never met her. Actually, that's not true. Usually I plan my sewing projects a little bit better, but this was one of those opportunistic, I have a day and a half, let's see if we can bang out a dress before the holidays really get going. So let's go over to the pattern collection and see what we have. So I've pulled out several patterns, and this is why I should have put some forethought into what I wanted to do, because now I can't decide.
And so it begins the agonizing task of choosing which pattern I'm supposed to use.
Help. Deciding is so hard.
I'm not about to publicly admit how long it took me to make this decision, but I chose to move forward with a pattern I've used before.
Okay. I think we've made our decision. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's do it. And step one is wash and iron your fabric. I obviously did not wash this. It still got its tag on it. But I will iron it nice and flat so that I know what I'm working with.
As they say, measure 6 times, cut once.
Okay, just kidding. So forget measuring. I realized that if I want to use any of the extra yardage that's not used up by making the bodice pieces, they'll need to be the exact same length. So I just folded the whole thing in half, snipped this along the fold, and then I will have 2 equal sized pieces. And then I'll start laying out my bodice. So throwing measuring out the window. Who am I? We are at pattern placement stage. So this is the front bodice, and it needs to be cut on a fold. So what I'm trying to do is find a spot where I can get as much of this sort of motif as possible. I think it'd be really cute to have this right along the waistline. So this is probably where I'll put this, that when I flip it over on that fold, we'll get the whole section. I'm gonna try and make the back piece match because I want to maintain this border print all the way across. I really do need to put the back bodice on the same level so that they match.
While I have made this pattern many times before, this is the first time I'm making the sleeve to go with it, so I need to trace out that pattern piece before I continue. So I tend not to cut out my pattern pieces from the pattern tissue directly because I want to be able to modify them, make changes, or just be able to make different sizes in the future. So I'm just tracing it out on some tracing paper that I buy at the art store and cutting it out with my paper scissors. And then using all of my brain cells to fold up the pattern tissue back the way it was before.
Update time. I have the front bodice and back bodice pieces cut out. The darts are all sewn and pressed nice and crisp. I realized that I will need to do all of those same steps over again with a lining layer. So I'm gonna grab my stash of old sheets. So similar to using tablecloths, very often they're cotton. very often they have the odd stain or two, so you have to be a little careful about what pieces you're using. And this is what the sleeve section looks like, remembering that the 5/8 of an inch at the bottom will be seam allowance and same as along the top. So I kind of want whatever pattern I use to sort of fall within the middle section. I thought about doing this way, and then I had an epiphany. Woo! If I flip it this way, I can still make sure that my grain lines are lined up. I can actually tuck it even like this so that most of what's in the seam allowance is just plain white, and then I've got these flowers along the sleeve cap.
And they look a little something like this. Ta-da!
Okay, so I think we are done with the cutting and the ironing. Sewing is a misnomer. It's all about ironing and cutting, some panicking, and then some assembly at the end, which also sometimes involves panicking. Alrighty, so because I've always made the sleeveless version of this dress, turns out doing the version with the sleeves is quite a bit simpler. All I have to do from pattern is attach my shoulder seams together on both the dress fabric, the fashion fabric, which is the tablecloth fabric, and the lining, and then same thing, do the side seams on both of those, and then basically sandwich them together and stitch it along the neckline. So pretty simple. I did cut out my facings. These are just medium interfacing. I usually use iron-on interfacing, but this pattern requested the sew-in variety, and I happen to have some, so we're going to use that. The pattern calls for a slit at the top, but because I've made this pattern so many times, I want this dress to look slightly different from the others. So I think I'm going to omit that and keep this as like a straight square neckline. So I'm going to just, while I'm at it, just snip that off. Be brave. And then I'll just have a square neckline across the front. I have stitched all the things together. That was specific. I have stitched all of the bodice pieces together, and I have all my lining pieces stitched together the exact same way. And now it's time to turn them right sides together. And now I'm just going to pin all the way around the neckline.
Now we're going to head back over to the sewing machine, and please appreciate my atrocious posture as I stitch the neckline together. And once this is all stitched, then I'll go ahead and trim all of my seams and cut out all my notches.
Alright, so this is what I mean by trimming my seams. So I've cut the lining layer quite a bit shorter than the fabric layer, and this is all, of course, on the inside. And then all the way along anywhere that the fabric curves, or especially in these corners, I've really trimmed those corners with lots of little notches so that when the fabric is turned right side in, there's room for all of that fabric to come into a smaller space when I flip it around.
Next, I'm going to take this back to my sewing machine and understitch the seam allowances. So that means I'm going to push them over to the lining side of the fabric and run a small row of stitches all the way along, tucking those seam allowances onto one side. And what this does is it prevents the lining layer from flipping to the outside when the garment is worn.
Please appreciate all of the fun strips and confetti that trimming and notching creates. Ta-da! Okay, so this is what we have so far. It looks a little silly on top of another dress, and let's hope that zipper will fit in there. I am liking how the top looks, so I'm going to, I can't put it off any longer. I have to rethread my serger. But I will need the serger for my pockets because there's no real better way to finish those edges. So let's procrastinate. Hold on, I have an idea. Or instead of using the serger, I can just do a rolled hem on the sleeves, and then instead of set in pockets, I can do pockets on top. So I can take some of the extra fabric that I have left over and make really cute like poinsettia pockets. Okay, I may have saved myself a little bit of time, but that is a good thing for another reason. So the panel that I have left over for my skirt is the full half section of the fabric. And then in my scrap fabric, there is another little section. So if I wanted to add this little bit with the border print, I can, but then if I had side seam pockets, I'd have to rearrange all the math and figure out where this panel would go. But seeing as that doesn't matter, I can just add this panel to my other panel, make one long big skirt, gather the whole thing up, stitch it down the back, and add pockets on top. And then I don't have to rethread my serger. Perfect. So in order to do the rolled hem on the sleeves, I'm using my sleeve board. This one I got from a thrift store, and I'm not sure if it's the vintage fabric or the vintage ironing board, but smells like old lady's basement, so adds a little spice to the experience. So what I'm going to do is take my sleeve board and tuck my sleeve onto it and start by making a very, very small rolled edge and then ironing that down. I'm going to do that all the way around, and then I'm basically going to go back once that's done and roll it over again. You don't need a sleeve board for this. You could just do this directly on the ironing board, but I find this a little easier. Or if you have a tailor's hem, that's another really good option. Okay, so now that I've gone all the way around, I do have a little bit of excess fabric here, but that's okay. I'm just going to tuck that in and move this over so I can get as much of it at a time as possible, because all about efficiency. You just roll that over nicely and press it flat. So once this is all done all the way around, I go back with pins to pin it into place, and then I will run that through the sewing machine to make a very nice narrow hem. iPhone storage full. Hello. So while I was being cut off, I attached my first sleeve. So I'm going to attach my second sleeve to show you how I did that. So turn your garment inside out, and to hold my sleeve right side out, and tuck it into the arm side like so. I'm going to match up my side seam here and pin that together. You need a ton of pins to make sleeves work, and sleeves are notoriously difficult to install because, just like understitching, there's a lot of opportunities to basically snag fabric that you don't want in that seam. So they're known as sleevels in the sewing community because sleeves are evil. Okay, that should about do it. So I'll take it to the machine and stitch those bad boys in place. So just as the pattern suggested, I finished off the sleeve holes by stitching 1/4 inch away from the previous seam line, and then I trimmed those seam allowances down using pinking shears. So pinking shears are a vintage tool. You don't see them a lot anymore, and they cut in a zigzag pattern. And what that does is it cuts the fabric on the bias, which minimizes the amount that it will fray. So I could leave it like this. That means the garment will need to be hand washed whenever it's washed. Or if the next time I have white serger thread in my serger, I can serge those. That is what we have so far. And then tomorrow I will make and attach the skirt and the zipper, and then we should be good. So I will see you bright and early tomorrow. Bye. Good morning. That's a lie. It is definitely not morning, but it is day 2. I would like to wear this dress tonight to my Friendsmas gathering. So we're having a potluck tonight, and I think this dress would be perfect for that. So I have about 4 hours to get this together, but we're pretty close. So I'm only going to cut one corner. I don't know if I'm going to have time to add the on top of this gathered skirt pockets. So today I'm going to focus on turning this giant bolt of fabric and the scraps I have over yonder to make a giant gathered skirt.
So I start my gathered skirt by trimming off the excess scraps from the scrap piece of fabric and attaching that to my larger skirt piece of fabric. Now I'm going to be attaching these with French seams because I'm just never getting around to re-threading my serger today. So I'm pinning these together, wrong sides together with the right sides out, and then I'll be stitching them with a very thin seam allowance. Once I've sewn those shut, I will trim off the excess seam allowance so it's nice and thin, and then turn that to the right side up, iron it flat, flip it over again, and then now that the pieces are right sides together as they should be, I'll run another row of stitching along the seam line encasing those raw edges.
This is my giant skirt panel. This is my French seam, that's the inside of course, and as a very happy accident, look at that. the pattern matches up. So that was not planned, but worked out quite well. I didn't quite get the scallops to match perfectly, but pretty darn close. So before I run all my gathering stitches across the top, I'm going to take this opportunity to turn this over and hem it. I will iron it first so I keep it nice and smooth, and then I might be able to forego the pins and just hem this all down. In order to do that, I realized I need to switch to a red thread because I don't want my white thread that I've been using for the rest of the dress to show over this edge. So I'm going to do that, and then I will run 2, maybe even 3 rows of gathering stitches across the top of the whole thing, and then cinch that in and attach it to the bodice. Can we please appreciate how I just won thread roulette? All right, let's move on. My hairpins are falling out, pardon me. What are y'all doing today? Don't give up on me today. We have places to be. Okay, so because this is a very large length of fabric, I'm going to find my center point, and then my quarters. And this way, as I'm gathering it down, I can match up the center of my skirt with the center of my bodice, and the quarter sections are going to be lined up with these side seams. So, oh my goodness, you're kidding me. Okay, so it looks like that French seam I put in, I could have just put a pocket in it because look, it is on the quarter mark. No, it is exactly on the quarter mark. Oh, that's really frustrating. Okay. It's kind of at this stage, what time is it? Yeah, no, it's too late to undo the French seams, and it is a lot of stitches to undo, so we're just going to leave that as it is. We're going to learn from this moment together. All right, nothing we can do about that now.
While I mourn the loss of the pockets that could have been, instead I'm moving on to gathering the skirt down to match the bodice. So I am matching up the center of the bodice and the center of the skirt so that they're all aligned, and then just squinching down all of that extra fabric so that it's the same size. Then I'll go along and pin the whole dang thing. So the gathers that are really close to the edge, they don't actually have to be gathered all the way. I do want a little bit of a flat section at the back because that will be folded into my lapped zipper. So I don't want any lumpy chunky bits in there. And what I like to do is once I have all of this pinned in, I like to baste it into place, make sure there aren't any snags, correct any of those snags, and then go back in with a regular length stitch at the regular seam allowance and put it all in there. And of course, repeat that process on both sides. This is kind of like hanging a curtain on a curtain rod and making sure that they are the right size for the window. And then take the machine and stitch.
Oh, it happened. Whoa. Yeah, that's why you're not supposed to sew over your pins. Anyways. Okay. Let's see how we did. Remove your pins as you go, like you're supposed to, not like I did. Let's just be honest, we all know better. Does that mean we do better? Not always. And that's okay. Pin, 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 pin. Okay, I really like how that looks. It looks like I haven't, snagged any of the bodice along the way, so that's great to see. So now I'm gonna go back in, now that all my pins are pulled out, and I'm not gonna hurt myself. I'm going to stitch this at the appropriate 5/8 of an inch. I stitched it really close to the edge. Oh, here's a snag. So I do want to make sure that all my darts are laying flat, so I'll go in with a stitch ripper, my dear old friend, sometimes my nemesis, and I will pin this section flat, and then I will go along and stitch this again at 5/8 of an inch. Yeah, this is, look, it's basically a dress. It's kind of a smock at this point. I could wear it, but my butt would be showing. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm very, very pleased with how this is going. So let me stitch that down for realsies, and then we'll move on to the zipper. Speaking of foresight, who is she? Never met her, didn't consult with her this time around. We need to see if I have a zipper. So let's check the wonderful cupboard of random supplies. What length of zipper does the pattern ask for? 18-inch zipper. Okay, we might be in luck with this one. I think I pulled this out of a vintage dress. Let's see how long it is. We need an 18-inch zipper. And she's a 21-inch zipper. Okay, so we can carry on. My apologies for the brief moment of panic. And there are days when the hoarding pays off, when keeping that item worked out for you, and it justifies all the other hoarding. Because I have just the thing.
Everyone hates installing zippers, let's just be honest about it. So I'm using a zipper foot on my sewing machine and a basting stitch to sew my zipper in place. I'm starting off with the underlap side, which means my lining and my dress fabric are right up against those zipper teeth, and then the other side is the section that will lap over it. So bear with me as I zip my way into a zipper. And on this section you can see I am matching up my center seam on my waistband. I want to make sure that that bright red line is nice and even, so I'm lining those up with a pin, and then I'm taking the rest of my fabric and lapping that over the zipper so it hides the zipper teeth. I will pin that down as well as the lining, and then I will stitch really close to the zipper, matching up the pattern as best I can on the back of the dress. And then below the zipper, to finish off the rest of this skirt, I will line up the opening at the center back by folding these sections down nice and smooth. I should probably take it to my ironing board, but give me a moment, and then lining those sections up. And once I'm done stitching the zipper all the way down, I'll just continue those stitches down the center back seam and enclose everything together.
Okay, my friends, we are on the home stretch. This is truly the last step. I know I say that a lot. I lied. It's not the last. Second to the last step. The last step will be the hook and eye that I almost always forget to attach at the top of the zipper, but I will get to that. First, I am going to hand sew my lining to the dress. So I'm just going with a single thread and a thimble, of course. You gotta protect the fingies. And just doing a whip stitch all the way along the lining. So I'm just grabbing a couple of threads of the gathered fabric below it and pulling it tight. So I'm going to quickly stitch this together. This doesn't have to be too pretty because no one will see it, as long as my needle isn't going through to the other side. We should be good to go. So part of what I love about these tablecloths is they have a border print along the bottom, and that's a very common style you would see in dresses in the 50s and 60s. You used to be able to buy fabric from the fabric store with beautiful border prints. They've kind of gone out of style, shockingly. I know it was so many years ago, but they can be hard to find. So I think I will continue to make dresses out of tablecloths as long as they're in good shape and have pretty patterns. Something else I just thought of is I love that this is made out of an old tablecloth that is a little bit faded from wear and washing, and not wearing. Obviously, I'm probably the first person to wear it, but I love that I also was able to use a vintage zipper that I salvaged from another dress. So this is one of those garments that, like, if all goes well, could confuse historians. Could look like something that's truly from the past, which I think is kind of cool. Before I dressed in vintage clothes every day, I would buy vintage clothes at, vintage stores or even just at the thrift store, and I would save them for special occasions like holidays or special events, because I just loved how they made me feel so glamorous. I didn't care that they were different from what other people were wearing. I felt so excited to walk out to an event in a vintage dress and hat sometimes, so much more so than just sort of buying something off of the rack at the mall. I realized you don't have to wait for a special occasion. You don't have to save that perfect dress for some perfect event someday, or pass up the opportunity to, wear an item that really makes you happy. Are you ready, Bo? Are you ready? That's good, boy. We survived the holidays, and if you're watching this, I can only assume that you did too. Proud of you. Good job. You made it. So Bo is here in his lovely bow tie. Do you want to show them your bow tie? Yes, it's nice bow tie. Very nice. Let's debrief on this holiday dress. So I have never made a casual Christmas dress. Ever. It's always been very formal vintage restoration projects. So this was super fun to do something casual, and I love the print of this fabric. So shout out to all of the tablecloths out there in the world just waiting to be worn. 10 out of 10 would recommend making a dress out of a tablecloth. So a couple of comments about the dress itself. There are quite a few stains on it. That's just sort of unavoidable if you're using a vintage tablecloth. Other issues with the dress, I would say it really does need pockets. I've made this pattern many times before, but I've never used the sleeves, and it shows. There's very limited range of motion when I make this dress with the sleeves. That's mostly on me. I have fairly wide shoulders, and I didn't make any modifications to the shoulders of the dress or the sleeve pieces. So it is really tight on me, but I made it work. I was still able to hug all my relatives this Christmas. So I've already gotten a lot of wear out of this dress, and I was able to pull it off so quickly because I've already used this pattern many times before, so I didn't have to do a fitting or a mock-up beforehand. But if you are making a tablecloth dress for the first time, make sure you make a mock-up with scrap fabric first, because you only have one chance to cut into the fabric. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you'd like me to make next. I have lots of fun ideas of projects I want to share. I've got lots of fabric, lots of patterns, lots of inspiration. But if there's something you would like to see me make, please let me know. And thank you for being here. And we'll see you next time. Say bye, Bo. Bye.